I used to think the scariest part of horror movies was the imagination. The music, the shadows, the feeling that something was behind you, even when nothing was there. But what I didn't understand back then was how many of those stories actually started with ordinary people just noticing small things that didn't make sense and choosing not to question them. This story isn't about ghosts. It's about the kind of fear that follows you home after you turn the lights off. Because it came from someone who lived right across the street. If you enjoy real stories like this, the quiet, unsettling kind that stay with you afterward, you can subscribe now. Most people who listen to these say they prefer hearing them late at night, but after this one, you might rethink that. I moved into the house in early October, just before winter started settling in. It was a quiet, suburban neighborhood outside Hartford, Connecticut, the kind where people waved but rarely talked. Lawns trimmed, mailboxes identical. Porch lights all turning on around the same time every evening like a silent agreement. Normal was the reason I chose it. After a bad breakup and months in a cramped apartment with thin walls, I wanted quiet. Predictable neighbors, the kind of place where nothing ever happens. For the first week, everything fit perfectly into that expectation. Mornings were cold and clear. You could hear distant traffic from the highway, but not enough to bother you. A retired couple lived to my right. They watered the same flower bed every day at 9:15. A younger family lived to my left. Their kids waited for the school bus at exactly 7:42. Across the street, though, the house never seemed to follow a schedule. It wasn't abandoned. Lights turned on at night, the blinds moved occasionally, but I never saw anyone come out. I noticed it because every other house had patterns. That one didn't. At first, I told myself I just hadn't crossed paths with them yet. Then, about 10 days after moving in, I finally saw someone. I was bringing groceries inside when I felt that strange instinct. The one where you look up without knowing why. Across the street, a man stood at the front window. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, hands at his sides, staring outward. Not scanning the neighborhood, not looking at a phone, not adjusting the blinds. Just facing my house. I raised my hand out of reflex. A small, neighborly wave. He didn't move. I remember laughing to myself, muttering, "Okay, awkward." I went inside and didn't think much of it again until the next night. I was brushing my teeth when I glanced through the bathroom window. From that angle, you could see the reflection of the front of my house in the mirror behind me, and beyond it, across the street. The porch light of his house was off, but the window behind it had a faint shape. I stepped closer to the glass. The man was there again. Same posture, facing my house. The feeling I got wasn't fear yet. Just a quiet confusion, like catching someone staring at you in a waiting room too long. People zone out sometimes. Primera told myself, but over the next week, the sightings became consistent. Morning, sometimes there. Late afternoon, sometimes there. Night, almost always there. He never waved. Never adjusted the blinds. Never looked away when I noticed him. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't threatening. It was patient. That's the word I kept thinking. Patient watching. I mentioned it casually to the retired neighbor one afternoon while we grabbed our mail. "Oh, the guy across the street," she said, barely reacting. "Keeps to himself. Moved in a year ago. Doesn't bother anyone. Does he ever leave?" She shrugged. "I'm a Sura. Edos, we just don't see him much." That answer should have reassured me. Instead, it made the house feel heavier, because I was seeing him. Looked. One evening, around 11:30 p.m., I went outside to throw trash into the bin near the curb. Cold air, quiet street, nothing unusual. But as I lifted the lid, I heard a faint sound behind me. Not footsteps. Breathing. I turned around immediately. No one was there. My heart jumped harder than I expected. I actually laughed under my breath to calm myself. Sound carries strangely at night, I thought. Then I noticed the window. He wasn't just inside this time. The front door of his house was slightly open, just a few inches, and the darkness inside that gap felt directed, like someone standing just beyond it. I went back inside faster than I wanted to admit. The next day I bought motion lights for my porch. That was the moment. Looking back, when I started adjusting my behavior around him without realizing it, I parked closer to the door. I stopped opening blinds at night. I checked locks twice. Nothing had actually happened yet, but my routines were changing. A week later, I came home from work, around 6 p.m. Winter sunset already gone. Streetlights humming. As I walked up the driveway, my porch light suddenly switched on the new motion sensor, catching me. Except it wasn't he reacting to me. It had turned on before I reached the steps. I froze. Something had triggered it from the side of the house. I slowly stepped toward the corner and looked around. No one. But the side gate, the one leading to my backyard, wasn't fully latched anymore. I knew I had shut it that morning. I always did, because of the wind. I stood there for a long time, convincing myself the latch must have slipped, until I looked across the street. He was at the window again. This time closer to the glass, and for the first time, I knew he was looking directly at me, not just outward. You know how sometimes you feel watched, but it's vague? This wasn't vague. It was precise. I went inside and locked the door. I was still living alone in the same house. The same woman on the same quiet street, and the same man across the road was still watching. That night I barely slept. Around 2:14 a.m., I heard something faint from downstairs. A light tap. Thin. Another. Not knocking. Testing. I stayed in bed, completely still, listening harder than I ever had in my life. The taps stopped after maybe 30 seconds. I never went down to check. Morning came, and I told myself houses make noises in cold weather, until I opened the front door. On the doorknob was a small smudge. Not dirt. Skin oil, like someone had held it gently. From the outside, I bought a doorbell camera that day. The first 2 nights showed nothing except passing cars and a stray cat. I started calming down again, embarrassed at how worked up I'd gotten. Then, on the 3rd night, I got a notification at 1:58 a.m. Motion detected. I opened the app. At first, I didn't see anything, just darkness and the faint glow of the porch light. Then the camera adjusted exposure. He was standing inches from the door. Not knocking, not moving, just standing there, facing directly into the camera, for almost 2 minutes. I watched the playback again and again. He never touched the door, never tried the handle, just stayed there. Like he wanted the house to know he could come that close. I called the non-emergency police line. They came out, knocked on his door. No answer. They told me without evidence of trespassing or threats, there wasn't much they could do. Suggested curtains and documenting incidents. I didn't sleep that night either. Days passed. Then something changed. He stopped appearing in the window. Completely. For 4 straight days, the house looked empty. And somehow that felt worse. Because the watching had become predictable, its absence felt like movement. On the 5th night, I woke up suddenly to a sound inside the house. A soft metallic click from downstairs. I didn't move. My entire body locked in place as I listened. Another click. Divac door. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 without speaking, just letting the operator hear the noise. Footsteps moved slowly across the kitchen floor below. Me. Unhurried. Familiar. Like someone who had practiced the layout. I stayed silent until police arrived minutes later. They cleared the house, no one inside, but the back door lock showed scratch marks. Someone had tried multiple keys. The officer asked if anyone knew my schedule. I didn't answer immediately. I just looked through the window across the street. His front door was closed, but his porch light, for the first time ever, was on. After that night, I stayed with a friend for a week. When I returned, a patrol car was parked nearby occasionally, and I never saw him again. Not in the window, not outside. 3 months later, a detective contacted me. They had entered his house after a welfare check requested by relatives. He had been hospitalized. Inside the house, they found printed photos, hundreds of them. My house, from different angles, my car arriving and leaving, Me taking trash out. Me standing at windows. All taken from across the street, and some from much closer. They believed he had been entering the yard for weeks before the night he tried the back door. The detective asked if I wanted copies for a report. I said no. I sold the house 2 months later. Even now, in my new place, sometimes late at night I instinctively check the windows across the street, just in case someone is standing there, perfectly still, patient enough to wait for me to notice. If this story made you uneasy, share it with someone who insists real life isn't as disturbing as movies. And if you've ever had a neighbor who watched a little too closely, tell me about it below. Some fears make more sense once you realize you weren't the only one.